Salvete Discipuli. We have covered up to and including chapters 13 and 14 with our discussion on pronouns. Now, I just want to throw something in on volo and nolo in chapters 15 and 16 that also covers hic, haec, hoc, which I covered in my last video, and ipse, ipsa, ipsum, which I covered in my last video. So I just want to talk about volo and nolo. We'll get into the present and imperfect tense in a minute here. Volo and nolo are irregular verbs. Volo, we get the word voluntary from that, and nolo, we get the word no. Even though the Romans didn't use a word for yes or no specifically as we do. If a Roman wanted to say no, he would probably say minime, or just disagree with you, non sentio. I don't agree, I don't feel it. Volo, I want. And nolo, I don't want. Don't want. And we saw this used in the negative imperative, noli nolite. For example, don't touch me. Noli me tangere. And if I'm saying that to several people, nolite me tangere. Adding a te there. This means I want, this means I don't want. Obviously, it takes a complementary infinitive. I want what? I want to go, I want to eat, I want to run, I want to swim, I want to walk. These verbs take complementary infinitives in any language, not just Latin. Why am I making a big deal of these two verbs now? The reason I'm making a big deal is because these two verbs are irregular. They are irregular. They have an irregular conjugation that they must be memorized as such. You will see these verbs on your national Latin exam in March. So here's the conjugation of volo in the present tense. And once you get out of the present tense, everything is normal. They're not irregular anymore. In fact, the infinitives are vele. Look at that. To want. Vele, they look a lot like esse, ending in an e there. Okay? So let me conjugate these verbs to show you. Volo, vis, vult. I want, you want, he wants. Volumus, volutus, volunt. You can see the word voluntary right there. I want, you want, he wants, we want, y'all want, they want. It's irregular. Not the personal endings, ost, mus, tis, enti, that's normal, but the stem. They don't belong to a conjugation. They're in a class by themselves as irregular verbs. Nolo gets even more weird. Nolo, non vis, nolit, nolumus, non vultus, two words, and nolant. These must be memorized. And a good way to memorize them is to use them in your translations. Read through the translation and then put it into English. Go into files for download. Magister Carpinos has several sheets in there on tips on translation. And of course, the biggest way is chunking. Taking the translation in little chunks, a little bit at a time and moving along. Even if it sounds awkward, as long as you're getting the meaning out of it, that's the important thing. What are the Romans trying to say about themselves? Okay, so there's the irregular conjugation of those two very popular verbs. Normally, verbs that are very commonly used become the most irregular in English or Latin, any language. Okay, now I want to focus on the present and imperfect tense. We've been using the present tense since September the 6th when you first started the course here, September 5th, September 6th. Now we're going to move to the imperfect tense. Imperfect means incomplete. Incomplete action in the past. You're going to see that word a lot of times when we get into the second year of Latin in reference to the subjunctive. Incomplete. So imperfect. You need to remember two words, be-a. All conjugations are going to do the imperfect tense the same way. If you can remember those two little words, two letters, you have got the imperfect tense down. It is do we have the imperfect in English? We sure do. It's translated this way. Okay, let me erase present tense because we already know that. Because we're going to do I was, let's say, I was calling. I was calling my friend. Okay, I used to call. my friend. I kept calling my friend. I began to call my friend. You can see the imperfect tense. This is the most popular translation in English, was or were. Anytime that you have an action going on in the past, it's like a movie camera, that is still going on. I was doing my laundry when I heard the doorbell. Well, it's still going on if you haven't finished your laundry yet. I was doing my laundry. So it's an incomplete action in the past, imperfect. Perfect means completed. So we get to the perfect tense, which we will in this chapter here. I'll be talking about complete and incomplete action. But right now it's incomplete. These are the various translations that you'll see for imperfect. You will see this on your National Latin exam, the imperfect tense. And of course you look for the VA. If you see the VA, you've got imperfect. Well, how do we put this together? Well, we need the stem of the verb. Where do you find the stem? By cutting off the RE. So let's take voco, vocare, and I'm going to put all the principal parts. Vocali. Latin verbs have 4 principal parts. Vocatum. Don't worry about this one until Latin 2, so you don't have to worry about it today at all. And this we use to look up the word. We're going to worry about this later on when I talk about the perfect tense, but right now we're going to focus on this guy here, our second principal part. We're going to cut off the infinitive ending RE because that means to call. And what we have left, folks, is the stem, voca. So we take VOCA, and we do this with any verb, by the way. I'm going to write it out 6 times because verbs come in 6 packs when you conjugate them. VOCA. Okay, there's my stem. That means call. Then I'm going to add my BA. And let me change colors here because I want to really emphasize it's the BA that is making this imperfect. So I'm going to put this in red to make it stand out. And I put BA in all of them. Now I'm definitely in the imperfect tense. And then I simply add my personal endings. I'll put these in black because that tells me who's doing all this. M, S, T, not O, but M, mus, tis, and NT. And you might say, Magister Sears, why is it that you put an M there and not an O? And the reason is the Romans don't like the sound of A and O coming together. So whenever they have a situation like that, they'll put M. Bam, bas, bat, bamus, batus, bam. Those are the endings to make that imperfect. I was calling, you were calling, he was calling, we were calling, y'all were calling, they were calling. And you would do the same with a second conjugation verb, a third conjugation verb, a fourth conjugation verb. Not with the verb to be, though. Remember the verb to be, the present was sum est est, sumus est sunt. And I didn't mention this, but the imperative of the verb to be is es and esto. And if you're going to make it plural, este, estote. That's the plural. That's what is called a future imperative, esto. We don't have such a thing in English, other than the word memento. Memento is the future imperative of the verb memo. Okay? Anyway, that's if I say be good, es bonus. Be good. And but the imperfect of the verb to be is going to be eram, eras, very important that you memorize this. Erat, eramus, eratis, and erant. This should be in the back of the book. If it isn't, it'll be in the back of should be in the back of your Latin 2 book. But it's there. It's either in the index or it's in one of the grammar lessons between where the exercises are. But this is the imperfect of the verb to be. I was, you were, he, she, or it was, we were, y'all were, they were. Okay, so this is the verb to be separate from the imperfect here. This is normal verbs, irregular verbs here. Normal, irregular. So that's the imperfect tense. I was doing my laundry when I heard the doorbell. Wokabam, I was calling my friend. Wokabam amikum. I was walking down the street on Balabam de Wia. I was walking down the street. All right. So there is the imperfect tense. Let me now jump around here a little bit. I'm going to jump to the perfect tense, and this would be chapter 17 and 18, just as we approach Christmas. Okay, perfect tense, perfect stem. So this is going to be a little bit more involved than the imperfect. Imperfect was simple because we were dealing with the present stem of the verb, which comes from the second principal part. Now we're going to move to the third principal part, vocabulary. All verbs have principal parts. In English we have three: sing, sang, sung. Today I sing, yesterday I sang, all week long I have sung. Latin has four. We use this first principal part to look up the verb in the back of the book, or a vocabulary list. We use this principal part for the infinitive. It ends in RE. It looks like an infinitive. And we get our stem here. Remember we were talking about the imperative? Call me, vocame. The third principal part, and we won't worry about the fourth principal part until we get into Latin 2, so don't worry about that at all now. But it's there. It's called the supine. The third principal part. We need the perfect stem. How do you find the perfect stem on the third principal part? You cut off the I here. And you got V-O-C-A-V. Now, you do this to any verb, but whatever is in front of this I will not always look the same. All first conjugation, for the most part, with a couple of exceptions, will end in an AV there. Second conjugation, a U. Third conjugation could be anything. Fourth conjugation, usually an IV. You'll see these as you look up the words in lists. And in the back of your book, in the lessons, from now on, for about the next 4 or 5 chapters, they do perfect stems of all the verbs you've had in the book. They take all the verbs you've ever had, and they start listing the perfect stems just so you can get used to them. For example, the verb to speak, dico, dicere, dixi, dictum. You can see all the derivatives we get from that in English. Dico, dicere, dixi, dictum. By the way, speaking, not to get off the subject, but speaking of this verb, it has an irregular imperative. Dic, duc, fair, fac. These, you would expect ordinarily, a verb has a vowel on the end here in its singular imperative. When you cut off the R, you have a vowel there. These 4 verbs don't. So there are exceptions to the rule. This means speak, say. This means lead, duke. This means bring. These are all common. That's why they're. And this means do. Do. Facio, facere, feci, factum. Do it. Fac-id. Okay. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't think I did in previous videos. But there it is, in case you see any of those. Those are definitely imperatives. Let me put an exclamation mark here so that you know. Those are regular imperatives. Their plural is normal. Dicite, ducite, ferte, and facite. The plural is normal. Okay, just like this imperative over here, the verb to be, esto, este. Getting back to the perfect. What's a perfect translation? I have seen, I don't want to confuse you with was. I have seen. I did see. I saw. Those are all perfect translations in English. Now, how can we say that in Latin? Well, let's use these verbs I put down here. I called. I have called. I did call. I called. I would say vocavi. Second person, vocavisti. Third person, vocavit. For first person plural, vocavimus. Second person plural, vocavistis. Oh, misspelled that. Too many letters here. Vocavistis. And third person plural, vocaverunt. Now that's a lot of black ink, so let me underline what's significant. Or I'll circle it. E, isti, it, imus, istis, erum. Those are the perfect endings. I put them on the perfect stem. You put perfect endings on perfect stem. So right here, perfect stem. Deeks will come. You cut off the I. That's why I said deeks and not Dixie. You cut off that I, you're left with deeks. Dixie, dixisti, dixit, diximus, dixistis, dixerunt. Those are the perfect, that's the perfect tense. So in the imperfect, you have a present stem with a BA and then MST, mustis, NT. But in the perfect tense, you have perfect stem plus the perfect ending. You're going to have to memorize the perfect ending. E, isti, it, imus, istis, erunt. That has to be memorized. Welcome to the world of languages. If you were taking French, Spanish, you'd be memorizing. Okay. And people say, oh, French and Spanish is so much easier than Latin. No. Wait till you get to that verb. You won't be saying it. The Latin verb is much more organized. Because even though people say Latin languages tend to simplify, but actually, as they get older, but actually that can backfire on you. Sometimes it's not simple at all. It gets to be a little more complicated than that. Okay, so there's the perfect tense. It's a completed action in the past. What's the difference between a perfect action and an imperfect action? I could ask another question. What's the difference between a camera that you take a picture with and a movie camera that you make a movie with? It's the same thing. This is an imperfect action. It's an action continuing in the past, just like a movie. Whereas the perfect tense is like a snapshot. It's done and over with. It's completed. So, I saw my mother yesterday at 3 o'clock. That's a perfect action. It's completed, done, and over. I was seeing my mother when I heard the car crash. That's imperfect. It's not completed yet. You're still seeing your mother. Okay? So that's the difference between perfect translations and imperfect translations. But let the Romans use the Latin for the most part. Very rarely in the book do you have to translate from English to Latin. Most of it's Latin to English, so the Latin's already there, it's already correct, unless you're doing an exercise. Okay, so that's the perfect tense there, and I'm just going to look to make sure that we've covered everything that we need to cover. And just a couple more things. In chapters 17 and 18, they do talk about the numerals, cardinals, and ordinals. I'm just going to mention that. It's no big deal. Cardinals are the names of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And at the beginning of the course, you probably ran into those. Unus, duo, tres, quatuor, quinque, sex, septem, octonoum, diem, decim. And they sound like the months of the year, doesn't it? September, October, November, and December. And that's because the months of the year are named after numbers. July used to be quintilis. August used to be sextilis until Julius Caesar and his nephew decided to name them after themselves. And we'll be getting into the Roman calendar. I'll do a special video on that, just on Roman dates and calendar. So the numbers are back there in your book, right in the back section. If you have any confusion there, just look them up. So cardinals are the names of numbers. Ordinals are the order: first, second, third. Primus, secundus, tertius, quartus, quintus, sextus, septimus, octavus, nonus, and decimus. We're putting things in order. So those are called ordinals, and they're adjectives. They're all adjectives, the ordinals and the cardinals. I can say I have 2 apples. Okay, I saw 3 girls. Okay, I have 10. Hercules had 12 labors. Those are cardinals, and your ordinals are order. He sat in the 4th seat. Okay, that's what that's all about. And you'll see the Latin terms for that in the back of the book. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it right here. Now, one last thing that we need to go over then is, I see one other thing here, accusative and ablative time and distance. Let me just quickly do that because it's really simple but really important. When you talk about the accusative case, you're talking about stretching things out, whether it be distance or time. For example, he walked for 3 days. He walked, ambulavit. I can even put a word for he in here. Ille. When I use ille for he, that means that somewhere else in the translation they mentioned his name, like Horatius or Flavius or something like that. It's referring back to somewhere. Same with illa. If I just strictly want to use a word for he out of the blue, I can use is. So he walked for 3 days. Tres dias. Dias is a fifth declension noun, which you haven't had yet, but it looks a lot like the third declension, doesn't it? This is accusative. And it's accusative because it's time, how long. It's stretched out. He walked for 3 miles. It would be the same thing. Tria milia. Accusative. That's 3 miles. Now, so that's accusative is extent of time or distance. When you're stretching things out. Now, when you get specific, you use the ablative. The ablative is used for a specific time and date or a measurement. He built a wall 3 feet high. Specific. For example, on that day, AODA. Put that right in the ablative case. There's no preposition involved here, if you notice that. If you put something in the ablative, that means it happened right then and there, or in other words, it's specific distance, specific time. At 3 o'clock, at the 3rd hour, ora prima, or ora tertia, at the 3rd hour, he ate dinner. Okay, edit, Cana. So if you're talking about a specific point in time, on the 3rd day after he arrived from Rome, he started building his house. That's specific time, and that goes in the ablative. So the easy way to remember that is accusative extends things out, whereas ablative puts it right in place. It's specific time. All right? Just I needed to mention that because you'll see that. You may see it on your National Latin. I doubt it, but it could be there. Usually they don't have that. All right, but it is in your translation. One last thing, folks, that we're going to take this year. We have 6 tenses in Latin. We have, let me put them here, 6 tenses. Okay. We have present, which you've had all during the Latin block. We have imperfect, which was introduced to you before Christmas. We have future. You won't see the future tense introduced until maybe March, maybe the end of February, early March, just before the National Latin exam. So you need to know that for the National Latin exam. We have perfect, and these tenses are in this order: pluperfect and future perfect. Okay. These 2 guys right here, we're going to put a hold on them. We won't be talking about these until Latin 2. This tense here is the one I want to talk about right now. We've taken the present tense, we've taken the imperfect tense, we've taken the perfect tense, and now we're going to move into the pluperfect tense. And we're going to do it much the same way as we moved into the perfect tense. We need the 3rd principal part of the verb. So again, I'm going to take amo and give 4 principal parts. Amo, amare, amavi, and amatum. Okay, there's the 4 principal parts. I want the 3rd principal part, because I'm going to need that, and I'm going to need the stem. So I cut off that I. You do this with any verb in the language, even the verb to be. A-M-A-V, that's what I want. So I take A-M-A-V and write it out 6 times because verbs come in 6 packs. This is my perfect stem. And I need the perfect stem to form the pluperfect. Now before I add the endings, which will make this pluperfect, what is the translation for pluperfect? Pluperfect means an action in the past that precedes another past action. Before I ate breakfast, I had brushed my teeth. So it's the word had. Whenever you use the word had in English, you are talking in the pluperfect tense. Let me repeat that. Whenever you use the word had in English, you are talking in the pluperfect tense. That is a past action which precedes another past action is pluperfect. And this is what it looks like in Latin. There's your stem. It's perfect. Remember, the present stem comes from here. Perfect stem comes from here. That's why principal parts are so important. And they would be in English, too. Sing, sang, sung. Okay, we have, guess what? We have the imperfect of the verb to be. Eram. Actually, eram. You never accent the last syllable of a Latin word. Eras. Erat. Eramos. Eratis. That is an S. Errand. Okay, that's the pluperfect tense in Latin. You've got your perfect stem. Here's your pluperfect ending, which by coincidence happens to be the imperfect of the verb to be. Eram, eras, erat, erramus, eratis, errand. Are you listening to the way I pronounce Latin? Because that's the best way to get Latin down, is just to follow my pronunciation and Magister Carpinus' pronunciation. It will all fall into place for you. Okay, some of the students actually said, gee, this is a language I'm learning, I want to learn to pronounce it. Well, go to the audio files. You will hear me pronouncing Latin. Put a pause on there and pronounce it yourself, the vocabulary or the translations, whichever I'm saying. But you go to the audio files in your course online, and you will see the vocabulary being pronounced for every chapter and the main story being read for every chapter. So there's no reason why you can't repeat that after me. Repetite post me. Okay, so that's the pluperfect tense, and that winds up the grammar that we have right up to 19 and 20. Let me just make sure. Yep, we have. So that's our first block. If you have the CD, feel free to burn the CD for yourself, for your friends. Learn what's on it. Email me, ask questions. Go to your files for downloading for more tips on translating, for more information. Those files for downloading are very, very important. Okay, I expect to hear from you in either email or you can call me on the phone. The number is right below here, 888-844-6661. Volete Discipoli et bona fortuna.